All right, let's get started. I know these are always like rapid fire hours. And so I am so excited to kick us off. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome. My name is Kathayoon Khalil. I'm the Director of Engagement for Zoo Advisors. I'm based in Portland, Oregon, where we just got a little dusting of snow this morning, which was a fun surprise. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. I'm just going to go in the order that I see them on my screen. But if you are not a panelist, I would love, especially because we have so many new people here today, I would love if you would introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you are joining us from. I know we have a lot of AMZAP folks here, so would love to hear a shout out from the AMZAP folks. Yeah. All right. So Jamal, you're the first one on my screen. Hi, friend.
Hi, morning, Kat, and morning to everyone else on the session today. So my name is Jamal Andrewin-Bohn, and I'm coming live from Belize, outside the US today. And I represent two organizations. I am the Conservation Program Manager for the Belize Zoo and Tropical Education Center, as well as the Country Coordinator for MarAlliance here in Belize. Very happy to be here.
Thanks. Trevor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Trevor Mia. I am the Curator of Education at the St. Augustine Alligator Farm Zoological Park. However, I'm not in Florida right now. I'm actually up in Virginia with my family. So I'm spending some nice family time up here. I am also a member of the CEC and the Education Advisor for the Indigo Snake Program.
Tiffaney.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tiffaney McClendon. I'm the Guest Services Programs Manager at the Birmingham Zoo in Birmingham, Alabama.
Natali.
Hi, everyone. I am Natali Rodgers. I'm the Director of Learning and Evaluation here at the Tennessee Aquarium. I'm also a CEC member as well. Excited for today.
For those of you who aren't hip to the acronyms, the CEC is the Conservation Education Committee for the AZA. Eric.
Hello, I'm Eric Turner. I'm your Volunteer Engagement Supervisor here in sunny Jacksonville, Florida.
No snow in Jacksonville? That's weird.
Not a drop.
Climate change. I want to also give a shout out to Charles Hopper and Lori Perkins. They were not able to join just because of life and all their comings and goings, but they were instrumental in pulling together this panel. Our text thread would be pages and pages long of thinking about the questions and the points that we want to hit on over the course of this hour together. So I think with that, I'm going to just leap right in. We have a few questions for the panel, but if you have questions as well as we go, obviously, if you've been here before, you know how it works. And if you don't, just throw your questions in the chat. David will be monitoring those. So we will try to get to as many as possible. So when we first thought about this panel, we were thinking about the idea of Black History Month and how do we want to acknowledge that. And Lori sent around a wonderful website, movement, etc., that's instead trying to reframe as Black Futures Month, knowing that history is important to understand and recognize, but also looking to the future, which is why we have the five of you leaders, emerging new upcoming leaders in the field here with us today. So with that, my first question is, what would you consider to be, it's a big question, an ideal future for the Black community inside zoos and aquariums? And anyone can start.
I personally would love to see our senior management staff, our higher educated staff, so those with our master's, PhDs, and our bachelors, reflect what our demographics are for our visitors. I know a lot of our zoos still are still learning how to collect demographics. And, how do we assess those? But I think, being able to match, what our senior level management staff is to, the people that are in our parks would be a huge step towards our people.
Anyone else?
I personally, here in Jacksonville, we have a lot of minorities that work within like our facilities and food service positions, but I would like to see more like in-house career fairs to where they can see other opportunities once they, somewhat mastered their abilities in their original hire positions, seeing other opportunities they can do within the organization. Like for myself, I enjoy going out and just talking with everyone, just letting them know about the many facets of things I do, not just with volunteers and interns, but just other committees I'm on. And it inspires them to want to do the same thing too. So just more of that to where they can see, all right, I've got in, so to speak, my foot's in the door. This could be my next step.
This is Natali. I would love to see opportunities for people of color to be able to be at the table to provide feedback so we can continue to make real change. I truly believe in diversity of thought, and I truly believe that everyone needs to be at the table in order to make that real change. And I think that's one of the things we definitely are striving for in the AZA, and we've made a lot of headway, but it's still it's definitely something that needs to continue. We need to keep striving for and keep pushing for.
This is Tiffany. I would say, of course, I'd like to see, greater representation across all levels, from top to bottom, that, is more in line with the representation in the general population, but then I'd also love to see us being active in outreach and mentoring, where we are connected to the community's young people, so that they're knowing about the zoo and aquarium world, and they're getting to touch it and be a part of it before they're even making the decisions about what they want to do when they grow up, right? Where this is just at the point where they become an adult, zoos and aquariums and conservation work has always been a part of who they are, and what they saw was representation in that field. So of course they know that there's a way into that field for them, and that those gates are open. So I would love to see a lot more representation, and then a lot more connection with very young people to get those doors open.
Hi, Jamal here, just coming in, I think at the end to echo what has been stated already, particularly with the view for encouraging participation from communities of color and more diverse communities that are typically seen in the conservation field. And I think it is critical to have that representation, so young people, as Tiffaney has mentioned, can identify with them and to see, oh, well, there's actually jobs outside of the traditional, your kind of standardized list of what careers people typically talk about, especially in more underserved or more urban communities. They may not be thinking outside the box to think of more creative and more compelling careers that they may already have an interest in. They may already have an interest in nature or wildlife or plants, whatever it may be, but it might have already been imposed on them that that's not a viable career path, that you can't make money off of that, or it's not useful, or it's not, stick to doctor, stick to teacher, and so on. So I think it is critical to see more representation, and as already has been mentioned, seeing those people go out and be ambassadors to their communities to advocate for these career paths. And not only that, but if we think about the conservation challenges that we face on a global scale or a national scale, whatever it may be, that we typically tie to the wildlife that we exhibit and advocate for in zoos and aquaria. These environmental challenges have impacts on the communities that depend on them, on the ecosystems and animals that are endangered or threatened. And as you all probably already know, it's always understood that diverse or minorities and marginalized communities tend to bear the brunt of that burden. They tend to be disproportionately more affected by any kind of environmental challenge, whether it be to public health, global warming, water quality, etc. They're the ones that pay the ultimate price, more so than affluent or majority represented communities. So it's not to say, it is important that they connect with and understand these concepts and why it's important to them. Not so much that we expect them to make life-altering changes, because they are often not in a position to do so, especially in lower income housing and so on. but adults typically have a vote where they can advocate and unify their communities to push for change that benefits them, as well as any of the environmental issues that are brought to them. So they do have a say and influence in that respect to demand change on behalf of their communities and behalf of the wildlife that we are advocating for. And of course, just to sound it off again, it is important to have people they can identify with, telling them why this is important or helping them understand why it is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, that representation piece comes up so much when we think about this work. And so my next question for you is, how do we get there, right? If that's the future we want to see, if that's the North Star, what would you like to tell today's leaders, today's, the people in positions of power today, about how we can make it to that North Star, how we can reach those goals?
I would start off basically with what Tiffaney was just saying. You have to start young. You have to get out there in the community. I know, at least in my upbringing, if it wasn't said within my household or my church, I didn't know anything about it. So we have to do a better job of telling leadership, hey, we need to connect with these young folks. We need to go out into the community more so than what we are already doing. I know it sounds easy, but it takes time, and you have to build that relationship with the urban community as well. Just going out there seasonally, quarterly, that's not enough. We have to be a continuous presence like in these communities. So like Tiffaney said, starting young, letting leadership know how important this is, because if they're continuously seeing people of their same color coming to them repeatedly, it's going to work, because they're going to see, okay, this person isn't giving up. They definitely want me to be a part of what they're doing. Let me just at least go see what's going on. Then they'll tell a friend, and they'll tell a friend. I need leadership to understand that more and empower us to do those things.
Yeah, and going off of what Eric and then Tiffaney said, I think it kind of leads to, and it's something that we've all been kind of dreading, especially those who deal with budgets, but paid internships. We can't fix our problems unless we really start to pay, our younger generations the money that they deserve while they're at our facility doing the work that we need them to do. We are right now in a huge issue with staff retention, right? We aren't seeing our entry-level staff staying for more than maybe a year, 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And, a lot of it's reflected back in quality of life, and a lot of it's reflected back in rate of pay. And I think if we are able to kind of push that envelope on paid internships, making sure that, our people of color, our young minorities are, getting the money that, or they are seeing a future where they can, make a living in our field, then they might be more encouraged to, stick with that track or stick with that field, or, be more retentive within our field.
I would say also, adding on to that, is that we have to make accessibility equitable, right? To account for the difference in the starting line. So paid internships, I think, is one piece of that, but it has to go further than that. For example, typically you don't get an internship unless you're in college. So how do we get the kids that we've connected with who don't have ideal resources to go to college on the path, right? So we've got, there need to be scholarships specifically for those heading into the zoological world, right? Paid internships, like I said, is a step for that. But perhaps there are other avenues that we open, like apprenticeships and mentorships, because not everybody has that availability right up front to get out of high school and say, okay, I want to be an animal care professional, and I am gonna, go to this college and study this and then get an internship paid, hopefully. And then, we need to find different tracks and different ways to make this area accessible. And they need to be equitable. So it doesn't need to be the same for everyone.
I completely agree with that, Tiffaney. You took the words literally out of my mouth as I went to unmute. The accessibility piece is huge. And a lot of times you do have internships that are available, whether they're paid or non-paid, once you're on the college level. So providing those opportunities for our youth at the ground floor. And I'm talking about pre-K and I'm talking about kindergarten. I know that makes things a little scary, but how do we connect with them and start that and lay that foundation as we're moving up? What are those opportunities that we're providing as they are getting older, our youth is getting older? So they should be able to have multiple touch points prior to them even going to college with what we're doing. And the other piece for me is that I want to talk about is, what does our culture look like once they come to our spaces? What does it look like when they come to our facilities? Representation, like we've talked about multiple times, is definitely key. But is there a sense of belonging? It also goes back to those voices being heard. You know, I think one of the things I want to challenge us all with is, you know, it's so easy if these things are not your experiences, or maybe you've not gone through the same things as someone else. It's hard to kind of remove those lenses and try to look through the perspective of that individual. So I would challenge us all to really look at, to try to walk in somebody else's shoes, or try to acknowledge those things that they've gone through, and listen to those voices. Do they belong when they get here? If there is there representation, do they see others that look like them? Is there a feeling of trust and a safe space? I think all of those things are important. And then for me personally, you know, sometimes I've even questioned, is this a safe space? Is this a space for me, right? A person of color, a Black woman. Is this a place? Is this a niche for me to stay in and go in, and keep moving forward? And I think that's something we need to be mindful of.
Any other messages for senior level staff, or pathways on how we might achieve some of these goals?
Just to add to Natalie's point on making sure there is a sense of belonging, I think it's obvious, but probably often overlooked, and not necessarily intentionally, but one half of moving forward these opportunities is what's already happening. So having more conversations around them. I've noted that there's been committees and groups established in zoos in the US to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and so on. So it's been acknowledged. People are think tanking and brainstorming how to bridge the gap. And there's a lot of well-intentioned creative thought being put into it. But the other aspect of that, which always needs to happen in any sort of framework, is consultation with the stakeholders you're trying to serve. So not only, as already been noted, multiple check-ins to let them know the opportunities on the zoo and aquaria end, but also finding out what they want, or what their interests are, those that are included, making sure that they are consulted and spoken to, quite frankly, about their sense of belonging, and as has been noted, and absorbing and taking into consideration that sort of feedback they may get to help improve the experience, not assuming that just giving the opportunity is sufficient, but tailoring it again to everyone's unique experience in that field, which is hard, but it takes revision and adaptation. But if there is true commitment to advancing their opportunities, it has to be personalized to a certain degree. So definitely open dialogue on both ends, giving them the opportunities, or speaking to them about opportunities, but also being willing to listen about what they want and what would be most beneficial to them to meet them halfway.
Trevor, I see your, Natali. Trevor and Natali, I see you're unmuted. Go for it.
Yeah, I was gonna agree with kind of making those partnerships with the community, but I think it almost is taking a step further. It's really hard sometimes for our especially young children of color to see as we were saying, that path forward when the person that is presenting that information doesn't look like them, right? And, we kind of get stuck in this kind of circle. And I've heard this many of times before, where it's like, well, we have to get people that, represent them to present this information so they see that path forward. But how do we get those people there in the first place? Because, and I think this is something that we'll touch on later. It's like, what does our zoo and aquarium field look like right now? I know, at the facilities that I've been at, I've been the lone minority, not just the lone Black person, but the lone minority there. So especially when in our education departments, those are the departments that are going out and doing these community outreaches. So I think we have to figure out a way to, when we're scheduling these programs or scheduling these community meetups, right? It's not a person that they can't connect with, both when they are physically talking to them, but also just observing them, looking at them. So that's a tricky one to try to tackle.
Natali, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
And I think Trevor just hit the nail on the head.
Something, I mean, what you all just said reminded me of a story that I heard that I want to get your perspectives on. So a colleague reflects on a time when he went to Emory University in Atlanta and told all of these, you know, college students at Emory about a career in the zoo and aquarium world. And he sold it the best he could possibly could, right? Like, it's so awesome. Like, you get to work with animals, all this stuff. And at the end of the session, no one signed up for his programs. No one signed up for his mentoring opportunities. And he asked them why. And they said, well, and this is the part that resonates with me as not a member of the Black community, but a first generation American, is, you know, this sounds awesome, but I'm the first person in my family to go to college. This is not what I'm going to do with my career and my life, and the privileges and opportunities have been given to me. And that like makes my like skin tingle and my blood boil. And that's why I want to throw it out there, is talk to me, tell me about that perception. How do we address that? Right? How do we tackle that barrier?
I'm gonna say for me, of a little bit different experiences. I feel like within my culture, personally in my household, and with my family, it wasn't really talked about of having a career in conservation. I didn't realize, which is interesting now because I work at this aquarium, I could do this job until I visited. There was actually a job, something like this, working with animals, engaging guests, until I visited the Tennessee Aquarium. So those field trips are important, right? People come in here. But for me in my household, it was talked about, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer, those high paying jobs. And there's even been instances that I know of that I've heard when I'm leading groups of, oh, look at that person working with the elephants. Oh, this is what happens when you don't graduate or you don't go to college. It's those misconceptions that you hear. And I think for me, knowing personally, I've heard that in my household, and they call me the Crocodile Hunter in my family. But this is new for them because I am surrounded by Black excellence. I'm surrounded by you know, doctors and lawyers, teachers, people in education fields, nurses, writers, authors, you know, politicians. So when I wanted to say, I love this experience at the Tennessee Aquarium and I want to do something with this, it was looked down upon. So I think one of those things is helping to change those narratives and sharing those stories, right, of what exactly we do in AZA and why is it so important, and making it a safe space. Once again, that becomes that question of, do I belong here? Is this for me?
No, it's so funny that you get called the Crocodile Hunter, because so do I. And it's, I think, you know, it's that kind of stigma where it's like, okay, you're that one person in your family that has that passion for wildlife or the passion for conservation and habitats. And, you know, as you were kind of saying, you know, I'm surrounded by a lot of people in my, you know, community, my family, people of color, who are also very successful. But a huge roadblock, I think it's a roadblock for everyone that's, you know, within this conversation, no matter what your color, you know, what you it's rate of and you know, especially in a world right now where it's increasingly more inclusive, and the zoos, honestly, the zoo and aquarium community, we're moving the needle forward, but it's not moving at the increments that I think it should be in order to make our appealing. I mean, when you're posting that are, you know, a supervisory position that, you know, managing a team or a multi-member team, you're gonna be dealing with budgets, and the rate of pay starting out is $50,000, right? You can go to Hobby Lobby and be a shift manager there and probably make $10,000 more. So that is a huge issue that we do have to face, and something that we have to evaluate when we are thinking about, you know, who are we trying to attract with our positions, and who are we trying to attract with, you know, our job descriptions, and who are we trying to attract with our rate of pay?
It must be something in our communities, because I am also the crocodile guy within my household, all of my family around the world, successful people as well, backgrounds in military primarily, couple of doctors, but a lot of my family members and peers are catering chefs, cooks, and they have no idea that the zoo field for minorities reaches out besides beyond just the animal side. You have total operation sides that you can get into, culinary, things of that nature. So when I'm like everyone's saying, continuously letting everyone know that, hey, there's so much more that we can do, so many other opportunities. I use all of my social media platforms to illustrate how much fun I have daily. I'm constantly posting stuff on Facebook, Instagram, you name it, Snapchat. And I'm getting slowly but surely over these last 3 years, friends saying, man, you act like you have a great time. I do, come on, join me, So I've had tons of groups come out. My zoo team program is finally becoming super diverse. It wasn't originally, but it's like we said, it's just that constant reminder that there's so many opportunities, so many things that you can do.
I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about is making the touch point earlier. In the story that you told, Kathayoon, they were already at the point of college. So what if they had been introduced to this field in 6th grade? If they had been able to talk to people who were in this career field in 8th grade, if they'd been able to spend a day doing a shadowing program in 11th grade, then by the time they're ready to go to college, their attitude is completely different about this entire field, the work that goes into it, and the importance of it, because they've understood at that point for half their lives what's going on and how it is important and how it is worth putting their time and education and work into. So I think by addressing one thing, we can address another. And I will say, nobody calls me any names, but I think it's because I explain to people that the animals I work with at the zoo are the people. And they are by far the wildest, because all the others, you can predict their behavior. But those people, you just never know what they're going to do. So I think if you explain it that way, it might help.
It's hilarious that a lot of us have nicknames, right, in our families. And someone put in the chat about parent engagement. So yes, I completely agree. Whoever put that, yes, it does start off us engaging with people at a younger age, and not just when they're in high school and college, but it's also that parent engagement piece, especially for the Black community, people of color. You also have to think about, to your point, Kathayoon, of saying kind of your history and how you were the first to go to college. You have to think about the differences in our cultures. My mom was born in the 1930s. Her mom and her grandmother was a part of slavery. Their fights and the suffering was, we want to put our children in better positions than we were. So that's when you get the conversations of, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer, because those were not things that was accepted that you could do in the Black community, right? And it also are positions that in my head told him, you'll be financially stable, which should take out a lot of that stress that you might have. So they push those types of careers on us because they wanted the best for us. So I think it's important too to engage parents of, because you see an elephant keeper scoop and poop, that's not what happens because you didn't do what you were supposed to do in school. That was the path people chose to do. And really engaging with that community, yes, at a younger age, but also those parents, I think, is important as well. So whoever said that, that was spot on.
Yeah, I think that's a missing link. I know we focus a lot on youth, but that's Natali coined it or got it perfectly. It's where you're also up against generational and cultural expectations. And that resonates, I know, quite well in the US, but coincidentally also resonates here in Belize as a former British colony. We're still a relatively young nation. And so in my ethnicity, in my family, for example, I'm also the only conservationist. I'm relatives to doctors and lawyers and so on. But it's the same narrative. It's previous to that, people of my color, my race would be very, very limited in being in those what were perceived as prestigious jobs, doctor, lawyer, decision maker, people that are held in high esteem and also make good money. And so that's automatically what, your father, especially if he's like the patriarch, well, that son's going to be a doctor and you're going to be a lawyer. Like they've already carved out your career path for you. And so it goes back to that supporting curiosity and interest in the natural world or in conservation or non-traditional jobs in children, which we do well, but helping their families, their support systems understand why that is a viable career path. Part of it, obviously, we get a lot of is job satisfaction, but Trevor's already pointed out the other portion of that. If you're going to sell it, you also have to look at the financial aspect. Yes, I'm sure that some families like mine are glad that their children and so on are happy in the work they do and they see that they're doing something meaningfully and they may recognize that it's meaningful, but they also want to make sure that they're getting compensated well for that commitment, that life commitment to this field. So it's covering both bases, that generational understanding as well as the compensation that's already been pointed out. And it's a hard union, but that's the only way you're going to move it forward and make it more attractive to the larger communities, not just the children that are impacted or have the opportunity to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I was the person that put that parent engagement in there. I'm Teresa Goodhue from Shed Aquarium. Before working in the aquarium, I was working for a museum that showcased Mexican art, Mexican culture, and that was something that I had to talk to the parents about when their teens, their middle schooler teens, were coming to a youth museum that was also providing art instruction. And part of that application process was like, why is your teen interested in being here? Oh, well, they like to dabble with art. Well, but there really are some viable career opportunities here for your students. So it was really a matter of having that conversation with those parents to understand this may be a passion for your teen, and how do we help nurture that, right? And help the parents understand that there are careers available to them, and maybe not just creating art, but maybe doing it in different manners, right? Maybe it's in film, it's in radio, it's different mediums that they could also access if they had that base understanding, and be able to pursue their passions, their interests. So.
There was something just in the chat Yetta just put on here about
I saw that too.
Hey Yetta, how are we addressing those problems in the community? I'm trying to read the chat as we're talking too, because there's a lot of great conversations happening over here. But are we only going to those communities when we need something?
Mm-hmm.
Going because we want our membership numbers to increase? Are we going because we want more diversity within our institutions? How are we truly developing those relationships where it's a two-way street? Not just, and sometimes for me, it appears that I want something from you also. I'm going to ask you to do those things. But are we really figuring out what the priorities are for those communities and helping to support them and address those things? I think that's one of the key pieces that sometimes is missing. I think developing those relationships, those partnerships are really important.
Yeah, I love that comment. And it also speaks to a broader systems thinking approach that is really important, right? That we are very excited about the actions and the inspiration and all of that, but how does it land in different places, and how does it connect to problems that people are facing in their everyday lives? We had another Zoo Advisors chat at one point where someone said something that stuck with me and a lot of the other panelists, that why don't we cultivate relationships with our community like we cultivate relationships with donors? Right, that you don't just go to a donor to be like, money, please, you have a relationship with them where that ask makes sense. Later on, community relationships can be curated and cultivated in a very similar way.
And providing them with special experiences, right? A lot of times those donors get to do things that we're like, huh? Sometimes, right? But why do we do all of that for? And let's be honest and real here, for donors who would be categorized as the elite, right? They can afford all of these things, but then we're also preaching, oh, we want diversity. We have to look at accessibility and we want inclusion. It kind of contradicts each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I completely agree with you, Kathayoon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Natalie, I would some of our, we sponsor Boys and Girls Club to come to our facility all the time, but I would love to see them to get the same experiences that some of our board of directors get, some of our, so 100% behind that. And I think that's something that everyone can do within reason at their own facilities. It's just a matter of making sure that they make it a priority. And I think that it hasn't been a priority for a lot of people.
I agree. And I'm sorry, I can talk about this all day, y'all.
We are talking about this.
I think we need to rethink what donors are. Who are our donors, right? Who are those sponsors? Because in my head, I think about my volunteers being donors. I don't care if they give $50 or $75 or $20, they are still a donor in my head. And we're talking about accessibility and diversity. I think we need to really look at what is truly a donor, because if we keep going with this mindset of you have to have thousands of dollars to get these experiences, who are we truly targeting? And is that going to start to wane off for various reasons? And we won't have any new donors because they think it is only for the elite, or you have to be in this bracket as far as this, how much I need to make for income. I can't afford to adopt a penguin for $1,000 or $1,500. Like, what are those things that we can be providing for people, no matter what their economic situation is?
I think it's that I wanted to add to the idea of rethinking our donors, because I have a colleague that spoke along those lines to me a few years ago, and it really stuck with me. This person fundraises for a humane society and rubs shoulders with the rich of the rich and all these people. However, when we put on fundraisers in partnership, we always put an emphasis on anyone who contributes across the board, not only financially, but the ones that have social capital, like a network that can run around telling people to come to your event or to support this cause and why. They may not be giving you $500 or $5,000 or $10,000, but they might be connected to people at will, or collectively their efforts get you the funding and the support you need. And so those people are often, again, just in our kind of grassroots networks and our communities. And I think it's also another reason to do that, not just for the support, but it's a good indicator of how well connected you are to those communities you claim to serve, right? And I can use a personal example for our zoo here in Belize. The pandemic impacted us like everyone else, but one of the only reasons we survived on a day-to-day basis was not from we did still get support from some of our larger long-term donors, but ultimately it was the Belizean community, our local communities, that saw us through, that gave in kind, that came to the zoo when they could, even though they in their own right had their disposable income impacted and their jobs and so on. But because they had this connection to the zoo and saw its merit, saw its value to their children, etc., they refused to see the zoo crumble or falter, or to have the animals and the staff there connected suffer because of the pandemic. So it was a testament to, it reinforced to us, it was reassuring to us that we still have connections with these communities through our work. And so again, it is a really good indicator to look at your grassroots fundraising and connections rather than just the large scale ones.
I think it's an interesting point that Yetta made. I absolutely agree. We need more community engagement. And I think one of the benefits that people may not even be thinking about is when we're better entrenched in our community, when we're better connected to the community, then every aspect of our world and our space becomes more diverse, right? So for us, for example, we have a very interesting situation that's a little bit reversed from most. Our zoo kind of sits in the very center of an extremely high-end suburban neighborhood outside of our city. We're on city property. We are the Birmingham Zoo, but somehow we're sort of surrounded by this really, really, really kind of high income suburban area. And so a lot of within the city and around the city, people think of us as their zoo, right? And we're like, no, that's not, look, we're everybody's zoo. And so if we don't go out and connect to our community, they don't think that this zoo belongs to them. They don't feel an ownership. They don't feel that connection. And we can see it. We can go take a walk around the zoo and be like, that's interesting. I only see one demographic here, you know what I mean? And you know, whether you're talking about from the racial standpoint or from the socioeconomic standpoint, it's like, I see one thing. And so I think it's important to remember also that just to have a diversity in connections and the people who are coming and experiencing what we have to give needs to be diverse as well. And we only do that by being connected to our communities.
Yeah, Trevor, go for it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think what she said could be applied to many of our facilities. I've seen it at the one I'm at and the ones I've been at. So good point.
Yeah, which brings me to my next question, which I think we've got a comment in the chat that speaks to this, but what are the bright spots? What is the work that is happening out there in the zoo, aquarium, conservation, analogous communities, even museums, gardens, that gives you hope, that you want to say, like, I want everyone to know about this program because this is moving things in the right direction? And you can brag about it's your program too.
Well, I would say for me, is I love that we're moving away from diversity and inclusion to diversity, equity, accessibility, inclusion, justice. Like we're adding all the action that is required for diversity and inclusion. And that's very, very exciting to me. And I'm seeing that all the facilities are, you know, the AZA has made this a priority, and I see all the facilities making it a priority. And that, to me, that's very, very, very exciting, because there have been years and years and years of a lot of lip service to diversity. And then they kind of said, oh, it's not enough to have diversity. We also have to have inclusion once the diversity arrives. Mm-hmm. But now it's becoming even more. People are realizing, oh, there are things that we need to do that really take hard work and planning and resources, and it's exhausting. And we have to have these conversations and talk all of these tough things out. And I'm really excited that those conversations are happening, because I think we went far too long without having them.
I echo exactly what Tiffany just said. We hired an outside company about 3 months ago to kind of help us with our diversity plan. We had some internal stuff that we were doing, but you know, these companies came in and they've really been like the catalyst to help senior leadership, you know, middle management, everyone kind of put the pieces together. We have the from tos that we're working on, like things that are currently going on and how we want to change that perception so we can hire, you know, more people and they can understand that this is a more diverse place to work in. So yes, again, super excited that the pieces have been put together and that we're having those difficult conversations now that have been needed for years. I've only been here for 3 years, but a lot of these conversations have been put to the shelf for a long time. So people are becoming more comfortable with having these conversations. Everyone's kind of walking around with more optimism, asking each other how you're doing today, what's your number on earth, you know, and kind of just helping promote that engagement. And I'm seeing the results. You know, it's taking, you know, baby steps, but it's coming. So definitely excited about the right direction we're going.
Any other bright spots?
Yeah, I think what both Tiffany and Eric said, I think everyone can kind of echo that. Like, we have seen the steps that have been taken forward by, you know, AZA and our own, hopefully, facilities. And, you know, and it's really helpful to see when you're like looking through that AZA job board, as I know we all do, and you start seeing like these like DEI positions like just pop up, and you're like, you know, for a lot of our zoos that like, you know, we've been through the ringer over these last 2 years. You know, a lot of us didn't know if we would have jobs 2 years ago. And these are some of the positions that we're starting to see pop up, like, you know, almost as we're getting ourselves back on our feet again. I think that's really positive. I think, you know, I would love to see more of it, you know, but, you know, one step at a time. But I think that's a really, really positive step that our at least the people who are our directors and our CEOs are, saying like, what is this next job that we're going to create? What is it going to be? And they're saying it's a DEI position, so we can connect to those communities.
Any others? I would encourage you all to read through the chat. There are other examples that people have been throwing in there that sound really worth digging into and learning more about. We only have 13 minutes left together, which I would love to say, like, clear your schedules. We're talking about this for the rest of the day, but I know we're all busy people. So my last question for you, and this may end up being our closing question, we'll see how it goes, but what does it mean to you to be Black in the zoo, aquarium, conservation community? What does that identity mean to you in this space?
I'll start. It means a lot to me. My background, I don't know if you can tell, but it's sports. My bachelor's degree is sports management, master's is communication management. So a lot of my life, it's been preached, sports, military, but to come into this field, I love people. I love communicating with people. I love impacting tomorrow's leaders. So to take my talents that I have accrued through school and life and put them into the zoo field, learn so much about conservation that I thought I knew, but I really didn't know. And then being able to apply that, in my community, in my church, in my kids, it means so much because I'm hearing, like, I have 2 boys, hearing my sons tell their friends, well, why didn't you pick up that turtle? Well, why did you guys do this? Why didn't do that? And I'm like, oh, this is great. It's working, So it made me feel good that I'm making a positive impact in tomorrow's leaders and my fellow peers. So I'm extremely excited about the opportunity we have moving forward, especially being a part of this panel, having all these wonderful people listen to us talk about the things that we're passionate about. So I'm truly excited about the opportunities.
I would echo. Go ahead, Trevor.
You go.
I would echo the same thing that Eric says. What it means to me is continuously to show those equitable career pathways, right? When I end up taking this position and becoming a director, I know my goals and what I'm looking to do. And there's not a lot of people who look like me as I continue to go and move up there. But sometimes I forget, as I'm moving up that ladder, if you will, what does that mean to those who look like me? That I'm not even thinking about. What is that message and what is that story? And how does that inspire them to then say, oh, this is a space for me. I belong in the AZA community. I should be here. My voice should be heard. Those are the things that are important to me, just as a person, but as a Black woman. I want to be able to inspire generations, no matter what culture or background you come from, but any of those marginalized communities that thinks this is not a space for them, or this is not a career path I should go into, or this is not for me. I want to challenge that and continue to make real change.
I think after this conversation and hearing like what you guys have said, it truly means being a leader within a minority in our own people. We're all crocodile hunters here, right? And so we are all, making those, and there's been many that have come before us and there'll be many that come after us, but, we are definitely part of that, hopefully step forward and making, conservation for everyone, because it historically has not been. So I think we have a lot of work to do, and we have done a lot of work, but I'm proud of all our little crocodile hunters out there.
Mine is very similar, especially to what Natali said. It's being part of the representation is so important, and being I guess what some might consider a non-traditional part of the community. Because when people think about zoos, aquariums, and conservation, they think of people who work directly with animals. And so for me, my journey into this world has been completely different. So at this point, I am representing, Black female management. And that's a big deal. but also I started out here at this facility as a temporary cashier through a temp agency. So being able to explain, hey, it's their doors, their ways, you know, to do this work and be a part of this that you may not have realized. And being able to represent that and say that to a young person and have them go, oh, okay, great. So there are all these different possibilities. You represent them. That's what it is to me. And to me, that's really, really important. And now that the DEAIJ train is moving, getting to be a part of that. And so getting to be part of the solution to opening more doors to, you know, more underrepresented folks and being part of the group that's paving new pathways into the zoo and aquarium world is really exciting. I am so pumped about that. And I just really can't wait to see where it goes. But for me, at this time, that's what it means. It means being part of the representation and getting to open doors for the next generation, which is really exciting.
For me, it's recognizing and reconciling with the fact that the zoo and aquaria field and the conservation, well, start with the zoo aquaria field, that it historically was founded, was created as a way to extract and exploit natural resources of the wildlife by a majority group, both ethnically and socioeconomically, for the enjoyment and benefit recreationally of that same group. So it was never for minority groups. It was never for the countries that these animals traditionally came from. So recognizing that and accepting that as far as the historical context for our field, and then also recognizing that the narrative did change, that it became more stewardship and more conservation minded, however, still dominated by the majority group, by saying, oh no, we alone can manage these animals and we alone can save them, and we need to show the locals how to save them in the international context or in the local one. Our committees are the ones that need to keep these zoos running, and only we need to make sure these animals don't go. We alone can do it. So recognizing the shift in narrative was still, again, very dominated, very tight control over who accesses these resources, these wildlife resources, and who has a say in how they're managed and preserved long term, to present day, which is what we're doing now, which is changing the narrative again to be more inclusive. And so for me, it's important to make sure that we're leading by example, myself leading by example, to demonstrate that we can and should have a seat at the table, whether it be in immediate zoo settings, but also internationally in the grassroots efforts to save some of these wildlife that are showcased in zoos. Because again, to take it to an international context, we have a history of colonial or parachute science, where, you know, again, it's the powers that be, the developed nations and the zoos come in and try to do all the saving because they don't trust that the communities that rely on, you know, pick an animal, a crocodile, a jaguar, a hippopotamus, whatever, can do the work. And so that, you know, it's important to recognize that many zoos are moving towards recognizing the importance of partnering with these communities that are, again, diverse. They're usually persons of color. And so recognizing that partnership with them, I think, is important, because it does cover all bases of that narrative and making sure that that narrative is also exported back home to your zoos in the US too. So the same community that you're serving also see that not only is there diversity in the local context, but there's people of all colors saving these animals in situ, in conservation, and they do it well because they understand the resources, they benefit from it directly, and they, you know, if it goes, they're the ones that have the most to lose. So to wrap that up, just making sure that narrative continues and leading by example to make sure that it's a true narrative for conservation.
Thank you. What you just said, Jamal, just reminded me, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, but there's this paper that came out, and I'm happy to share it with any interested, a while ago, about the generations of conservation, right? All the way from kicking people out of the land because the land needs to heal and that can't be done with people on it, national parks, all the way to, you know, the fourth generation, which they identify as community-based conservation. And I would argue, and I would like to popularize this, that we are now headed into the 5th generation, which is a decolonialization and a democratization, going beyond just community-based, but also to community-led, community-championed, community-supported, all of those different elements that can help us to do exactly what you were saying, Jamal. So, oh my goodness. Everybody, this was an amazing way to wake up for me. I'm on the West Coast. An amazing way to spend an hour. You are all beautiful geniuses, and I'm so glad to know you all and move into the next era of this field with all of you. Does anyone have any closing comments or anything they'd like to share? Anything that's buzzing in your head before we close out?
I've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. And it's something that, also makes me feel like I'm not alone, because I think sometimes we can feel isolated in our feelings of it's not just me that feels that way. So this has been really helpful. And I want to encourage everyone that we continue to have these conversations, no matter how difficult and how tough they can be and may be. Through those difficult conversations, there could be real change if we take the opportunity, right, to really leverage what comes out of those conversations. So it's been an absolute pleasure getting to see new faces and meet new faces and participate.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. For those of you joining us on the audience side, thank you so much for being here. We will have a recording of this available for you to share. Some light listening for anybody, all of your friends and family and coworkers. So we encourage you to check that out and share it widely. And join us for our future conversations, whether on this topic or on any others. It's always a good time. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day and see you all soon.
Thanks for hosting, Kath.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for being here, Trevor.
This was
Thank you,
great.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, Natalie.